So I'm starting with my piece of fabric. A fat quarter is perfect for this project. It's a good size. You can get almost 4.5 yards of binding out of it. So if you have a quilting ruler with your 45-degree lines marked on them, so mine are here, you can use that as a guideline just by placing that 45-degree line along your straight edge, and then you're going to follow this edge of the ruler, which will give you a 45-degree cut. But if you don't, fold it diagonally so that your edges meet, and then just press that into place. And then we'll use our ruler and cut along that line. So now I'm just going to work off of these edges, cutting 2 inches away from that cut line, going all the way through my fabric. Now that I have my strips cut, I'm just going to stack them, alternating a shorter piece with a longer piece. So you're going to start with your fabric facing right side up, and you want to butt your edges up together so that the 2 ends are going at the same angle. So then next you're going to flip this piece over so that it's at a 90-degree angle to your other strip, and you're going to line up these raw edges. You don't want to sew them so that they line up perfectly from point to point. Otherwise, when you stitch your seam and flip it over, your edges won't line up. So you just want to offset them a little bit until you see a triangle there. How big that triangle is doesn't really matter. That's just going to determine your seam allowance. So when we go to sew this, we're going to start sewing with our needle where these 2 edges intersect and have our needle come off on the other side, right in that point there. So if you shift this a little bit more, your seam allowance is just going to be bigger. It doesn't have to be consistent. The only thing we really care about is that we're sewing from point to point. And you also want to make sure that you don't make it too narrow, because then your seam allowance will be harder to flip open and press once we're done. Clip those 2 pieces together. So I'll show you again with this piece. We're going to make sure our cut edges are going in the same direction, flip them right side together, line up those raw edges, and then just shift it up a little bit so you get a nice sized triangle there, and clip. And if you come to a piece that doesn't line up perfectly, then just overlap that and use the one edge as a guideline and just cut your end at a 45-degree angle. Now that we have all of our strips sewn together, we're just going to press open these seams. And the final step before we press our bias tape and create those creases is to just cut these little notches off. Now we're going to press the folds into our bias tape, and if you don't have a tool, what you can do is fold your bias tape in half lengthwise and just finger press it into place. You can use the iron as well if you like, so that you have a line to follow down the middle. And then you're going to fold the bottom up to meet that line and just press all the way down. And then you'll turn it over and repeat that on the other side, folding the bottom up to meet the center and press along that edge. This is much faster to do if you have one of these tools. And I bought my set off of Amazon, so it has a bunch of different sizes that you can use. This one is the largest one, and it fits a 2-inch wide piece of fabric. Feed the end of your fabric into the wide end of the tool, and as you pull it through, it folds your fabric for you. And then you just have to follow along as you pull with your iron. I like to keep my iron about 2 or 3 inches behind the tool as I go. If you get too far, sometimes your fabric will splay out, and then you won't get that perfect crease. And as you come up to a seam in the bias tape, you'll need to pull a little bit harder to get that through. And then once it comes through the other side, you want to make sure that your seam is open, and then you're folding the edges into the center. And then once I'm done, I like to immediately just wrap it around. You can use a piece of cardboard. This is foam core. Just wrap it around to store it so it doesn't get tangled and you don't lose those nice creases.